Welcome back, everyone. I am Cas Piancey. I'm joined as usual by my partner in crime, Mr. Bennett Tomlin. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you, Cas?
I'm doing good. We are discussing something near and dear to both of our hearts, I think, and I mean that legitimately today, as opposed to sarcastically like most days. We're going to be talking about some of the tools that we utilize on a day-to-day basis, more or less, to look into companies and individuals that are involved in a lot of the investigations that we conduct. For example, let's just say someone like Justin Sun, or a company like Tether. So we're going to go ahead and just take a look at some of these tools, how we use them, show them to you guys so that you have an opportunity, if you ever feel like it, if you're doing some sort of due diligence or you're interested in a company before investing or before talking to someone about them. If you're interested in any of this stuff, this should give you some sort of leg up on at least understanding something about them. At this point, I think it'd be good for Bennett to kind of talk to us about just the beginnings of how he ends up investigating, or what many of our viewers might end up doing if at the very first steps of looking into a company or person.
One of the first things I want to talk about is that sometimes it can be a little tricky to figure out what company you're actually dealing with here. Let's start with this generic company that we've perhaps talked about once or twice on this podcast before, Bitfinex. Now, if you just go looking in corporate registries for the string Bitfinex, you're going to miss most of the relevant corporate entities because very few of them are actually called Bitfinex. However, most companies will, on their website, give away what the actual name is. Sometimes it'll be down here in the footer. If you look at the copyright information, this tells you that it's tied to iFinix Incorporated. Alternatively, you can look at the terms or conditions or the privacy statement, and we can see here, this site is owned and operated by iFinix Incorporated and its affiliates, including BFXWW Incorporated, BFXNA Incorporated, Unis Said Leo Limited, and iFinix Financial Technologies Limited. And once you kind of have this set of entities, you are at a good place to start, especially if, like, Bitfinex is really generous in this case here, where they're even giving you like the specific corporation numbers and where they're registered. Not all places are going to do that, but at the very least having the actual name for the company is a good place to start, because then you can take that name to places like OpenCorporates, which I think Cas wanted to talk about.
OpenCorporates is pretty great in that you can definitely use it for free. You don't need to sign up. I'm sure there's some benefits to becoming a power user for something like this, but generally you can just type in companies, or for that matter, officers. So we'll go ahead and put officers this time. Bennett brought up just now Bitfinex, and Bitfinex, we happen to know who their officers are. I think it might be listed on their company website still. If not, we happen to know who they are. So we're going to go ahead and type in one of their company officers into OpenCorporates, Giancarlo Devasini. And we're going to search all jurisdictions. We're not going to try to hinder what we are shown. And there you go, Giancarlo Devasini. That's new, actually. What? I mean, this is a kind of a perfect example. I haven't looked for Giancarlo Devasini probably in a very, very long time. He's listed twice in this database, one with a Canadian company. Generally, Canadian companies have this weird numbering thing instead of actually going by names. So this is no longer active, but in the past 2 years, he has apparently created a company called the Cryptocurrency Association. It is a non-profit and it is located in California. Now, we can't obviously be 100% sure that this is him. There could be another Giancarlo Devasini creating cryptocurrency-related companies, but we're going to go ahead and type in this, although I want to pause there. So what this provides us is it does give us an address. This is likely Bennett. Are you seeing this? This company's address is 6547 North Academy Boulevard, USDT Bank LLC, which is news to me that there is something called USDT Bank LLC in Colorado.
I have follow-up questions. Follow-up questions that we wouldn't normally be recording. What?
I'm very, hopefully you're going to cut all of this.
Yes, I'm not putting
I'm shocked to have found this.
Why
this shows
is there
you that
a
we have
registered
not
agent with the last name Sun on USDT Bank LLC?
No.
Yunfang Sun.
Dude, so, okay. Anyway, look, we're kind of falling down a rabbit hole right now because Bennett and I have not looked for Giancarlo Devasini on OpenCorporates in a very long time, obviously. Finding this odd company right now, this non-for-profit, is throwing both of us off. Now, the beauty of what this does is that OpenCorporates provides us a link to the California Secretary of State. So now we can actually type in Cryptocurrency Association, search for it. It should pop up. Here it is. And then, so I would have to have an account with, to view this document with the state of California. Actually probably have that. Not logged in right now. But basically you can find out what's going on with this. That is available for us to figure out. We now know more about Giancarlo Devasini, at least when it comes to his nonprofits located in America. Now, is that everything that we can find out? Of course not. There's plenty of other officers, companies that we could type in related to Bitfinex, Tether, executives there, and see what's going on with them, what associations they have, and try to go from there. So this actually provides you with a huge amount of information, like kind of a shocking amount of information that you can utilize to actively search for these individuals. Now, I will say, Giancarlo Devasini is well known for being involved with Tether and Bitfinex. I am not aware of the Cryptocurrency Association or his involvement with it. So what this is showing us is his involvement in a US nonprofit. It isn't showing us his offshore activities, etc. A few days ago, you saw it. We discovered this on camera where we were just trying to show our audience some of these tools, and we in real time discovered something we'd never seen before. Now, it involved Tether and Tether executives, and you can only assume where my mind immediately ran when I saw that. But this is the beauty of what we're trying to teach you guys, is that not only can you use the tools, which is great, and it gives you all of this great data and information at your fingertips, and that's lovely, but you need to know how to navigate that once you've acquired that information. And that's what we were able to do with this story. So hopefully we'll link to it in the YouTube and in the podcast information, so that if you want to follow along with us while we talk about this right now and how we did it, you can. There's a Protos article about it. So we'll include that Protos article in the information. But Bennett, after I looked up Giancarlo Devasini and saw this company in California pop up, can you kind of talk about where it went from there, just at least the beginning of it?
Well, there was a bunch of strangeness around it. Like we mentioned while we were recording several days ago, part of it, like the address was USDT Bank over somewhere in China, associated with a company in Colorado as well. There was like name changes to like names of other cryptocurrency companies as well. And then we started looking at some of the other non-Tether executive names that were associated with this entity. And like what we found was that there was a civil RICO lawsuit against one of them from Google, alleging they were like pig butchering scammer who was running a bunch of fake things. There was like...
And just to pause in case, I think people have probably watched our Zeke Faux episode, longtime listeners probably have. But just to recap, pig butchering is this scam basically where it involves human trafficking, more or less, where people are put into big apartment blocks in Myanmar or Cambodia or Laos, basically Southeast Asia. I'm sure there's other places too, maybe the Middle East and other areas where you can kind of get away with this stuff if you keep your cool and your wits about you. And so pig butchering is when you take all these human trafficked people, force them to work on this scam and steal money from people, whether it's through fake cryptocurrency apps and being the helpful support desk, or it is a love romance scam. But yeah, I just wanted to fill everybody in on what pig butchering is. Sorry. So yeah, Sun Yunfeng is being sued by Google, civil RICO case about pig butchering. Go on, Bennett.
Yeah,
sorry.
And then one of the other names on that same list also was like someone who had been charged with a crime. And so then when we started to see these things, it seemed increasingly less likely that these were actually the Tether executives participating. And if it was the Tether executives participating, it was really important we figure out what was the context of what was going on here. And when you started to look into this a little bit, Cas, you came across some of the corporate loopholes that made it possible for this whole thing to come together.
Yeah, and I understand a lot of states operate on a good faith filing policy. I assume just to keep paperwork to a minimum, but there's got to be ways to do this better than the way it's currently implemented. But yes, basically using the tools that we already were showing everyone, I found these names on OpenCorporates, realized this was a California-based company, went to the California Secretary of State website, searched for corporate filings from this company, found these corporate filings, and then found the people actually involved. And once you find out those other individuals and you start looking them up and finding out that they're involved in these pretty serious scams, it leads you to start wondering about the mechanics of the policy in place. So basically, these guys were able to do this because when they put all the names of these Tether executives on the corporate filing this is not an LLC, this is some kind of other domestic corporation. When they put all these names on, they just lied and said, yeah, all these Tether executives are working with us, we promise. And they crossed their fingers behind their backs. Now, is this illegal? It is. It certainly is. The California Secretary of State's office told us that if I were to do something like this, try to do something like this, I would get charged with perjury, and that can carry certain. You can do jail time, prison time for that. It can be a real serious charge. But one of these gentlemen is a Chinese national, and he lives in China, and he ain't getting extradited for this. And so the question becomes, what is in place to try to stop this from happening? And they were semi-sophisticated for what it's worth, because in California, you can't name a company bank, for instance. So what did they do? They created that company in Colorado because Colorado doesn't have a law explicitly stating that you can't name a company bank. Like they were sophisticated enough to know those corporate rules and set up these companies in different places within the US. And I don't know what the repercussions will be, but I do think, let's dig a little deeper, because I think it's important for everyone to recognize how we were able to, as quickly as I think I was very much like, oh, I'm going to run with, this is going to be crazy, I'm going to run with this story. Within, I want to say 12 to 24 hours, I had done enough digging to be like, oh, this is definitely not Tether. But yeah, let's talk about more of that. Like, what other things did we have to do?
Because this seemed so extraordinarily strange for this person being accused of being a pig butcher to be on this random association with these Tether executives, there was a bunch of due diligence steps that we had to go through, and then that Protos had to go to report this out, reaching out to the Secretary of State's office to confirm what the policies are and how someone could possibly take advantage of that. Talking to someone at the Attorney General's office about how they manage the potential criminal aspect of some of these activities, and trying to even reach out to Tether themselves was able to state on the record that they had no association with any of these firms, which seems to be the truth. This isn't the kind of thing that Tether involves themselves in at this point in the arc. And so you have and this is a good reminder, we had the initial moment of, oh, this is a really strange Tether thing. What is Tether up to now? And the answer is nothing. Tether was not, as far as reason can tell, involved in any way, shape, or form with this. This was another set of scammers trying to use Tether as a cloak of legitimacy.
That's right. And you made this point. It's not, and you cleared it up too. So I don't want to, in a sense, Tether is one of the victims in this. They're not a real victim. Nothing was stolen from them. And ultimately, there is zero reputational damage to the company Tether, realistically. Even if the companies or the individuals that did get scammed think of Tether when they think of who scammed them because of the involvement that these guys pretended Tether had, ultimately, there is very little damage done here. But I do think it's important to note that the Secretary of State's office, and along with the Attorney General, they aren't checking this data. And the only way for Tether to get their names stricken from those corporate records is for them to have someone reach out and file complaints, which is insane. I don't know how else to think about that other than it shouldn't be, we shouldn't put the burden on the victim of what amounts to identity theft. We shouldn't put the burden on them to prove that it is identity theft. It should have been clear that this was identity theft. So I do think it's important. Also, we're known as being Tether critics and skeptics. So reaching out to them and essentially working with them to stomp out someone who was actively trying to pretend to be them was a different place for us to be. But it also tells me that we do what we do because we care about fraud more than the enemy of my enemy is my friend or something like that. Like, you don't want to think about that or think like that as a journalist. Or if you are just trying to look for information, you also want to try to be objective. Obviously, again, we come in with a bit of a tilt when I find that information. I'm thinking, oh, Tether's up to no good again. But to give yourself the space and the time necessary to back off from any initial bias, I think is a good exercise for anyone to have, because we all have that bias when it comes to anything. So yeah, I think like a lot of good lessons were not necessarily, these are things we practice regularly, but practice in good lessons took place, and we somehow were able to record it in real time, which I think is great because now we can share this moment with the audience. Again, a lot of due diligence though went into this. 5 days. We didn't find it and immediately post online like, look, looks like Tether executives are involved in this shady company in California. Like, no, that's not the right way to go about this. And if you want to do your research properly, you gotta actually get into the weeds and get into the muck. And sometimes it's boring. Sometimes it's frustrating when people don't call you back or don't email you back or refuse to speak with you. But these are steps that you have to take. Otherwise, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to look foolish.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and it emphasizes points we've made before in places like episode 100 and places like that. And like, just before we end this little cut-in, it was really interesting to see the kind of inner workings of this part of this likely scam. And like, this is speculation, but my speculation is that the reason they're doing this is so that when they're targeting like larger whales for this scam, they had like legitimate corporate documents that had like known names in the industry on it that they could use to try to defraud people. And it was really interesting to me to think about like that avenue as a way to like do this type of fraud on this type of scale, so that even if someone who was like the actual victim of this type of scam tried to do due diligence, they could be presented with legitimate corporate records that list people's names. And even if they went further and went to like the California Secretary of State website and like searched that company name and pulled it up, they would see that same set of names. Like, there was a lot of deliberate steps here to taken to like make due diligence on that part hard.
Yeah. I mean, that's an excellent point. And I think this is another thing that I didn't really think about this, but part of what gave us pause was I was like, well, there's no way Tether's due diligence department is worse than me about suspecting these two. Well, maybe when they didn't have a compliance or a due diligence team at all, maybe back then you and I were outpacing them for sure. But nowadays, I don't think that we could compete with whatever compliance team they have in place. And they are working with the Secret Service and the FBI and all the 3-letter agencies and stuff. So I don't think we could compete with them any longer. And I also was like, I don't doubt, we know that Bitfinex and Tether have worked with unsavory characters before, but these characters weren't those kind of unsavory characters. They were just the bottom rung of scam artist. And there was no incentive for Tether to work with these people. And I think our familiarity with this subject matter is a huge reason that we were able to pause and be like, whoa, this is sloppy and a mess even for Tether. This doesn't make sense. So I do think there's like a lot of layers to it and a lot of levels. And hopefully this doesn't poison the rest of the episode. I think these tools are important. Learning to use these tools it's important. But there's also just spending the time and practicing and learning about the subject matters and how to use the tools and how to take the time. And you can't learn that overnight. You can't learn that in a week. You can't learn that in a month. Like, this takes a significant amount of practice and time, and you're going to make mistakes. Journalists are humans, and I think it takes a really long time to get good at it. So don't expect to start utilizing these tools and instantly be a private investigator or something. But again, a really good foundational structure for finding these people. I can now keep going on the corporate stint here, because OpenCorporates is going to show us state to state. It's going to show us some specific countries sometimes, but what it won't do is show you other places. So this is, again, like I just want to go ahead and go here. Let me share this now. So now I'm looking at what is called Companies House. This is the UK version, essentially, of OpenCorporates. And so what we can do here, again, I don't know, I might as well, just for continuity purposes, type in Giancarlo Devasini.
And as far as we know, he's not an officer for any companies in the UK, so nothing should come up.
Right, nothing. But we do know, let's bring up a perfect example for this. There's somebody who goes by the name of Christopher Harborn. This gentleman, sometimes he has other names. This gentleman has been involved with Tether and Bitfinex, and also helped fund Brexit. So this was the #1 financier of Brexit. Christopher Harborn, also known as Shawcrete Sakuncrete, that is his Thai name. He is a Thai citizen as well. He currently has, what they're telling us is that he has 2 appointments. And so we're going to go ahead and scroll down. We're going to scroll down, and you can see that this is the gentleman who we named, right? And how do we know? Well, as I just told you, his other name is Shawcrete Sakuncrete. Well, that is his Thai name. His country of residence is listed as Thailand here, as well as here. And it tells us when he was appointed to these. It was in 2018, 2016. It's giving us information about his companies in the UK. There's AML Global Payments, which I believe is his aviation fuel company. And then there is Cambridge Advanced Research Alliance, which I don't think anyone's done any reporting on. Let's go ahead and click it. So if we click Cambridge Advanced Research Alliance, we soon find out that this is a private limited company by guarantee without share capital use of limited exemption. We find out that it's up to date. Everything is okay with it currently. And we can go ahead and click people if we want to find out who's involved. We already know that Christopher Harborn is involved, but now we find out that Catherine Mary Harborn, Christopher Harborn's sister, is also a director. She has resigned, apparently. So she resigned in 2021. So now it is just Christopher Harborn and Joanna Arminanen, who was appointed in 2018 as a director. Finnish, apparently, living in the UK. So now we have some sort of idea about the people involved. Now we can click people with significant control. We find out that that is 3 active people. Now, Christopher Harborn's sister is no longer a part of this. Oh, there she is. Yeah, ceased. So we have apparently a Thai citizen, a Finnish citizen, and Christopher as people with significant control. We can go to filing history. And the beauty of the filing history is that we can see things like when the exact date when his sister stepped down as a person with significant control. But we can look at exactly when the incorporation occurred. And when we click that, we can actually see. So now we can see this is actually the incorporation, like exact corporation date. And we can find out kind of some distinct things about it. We can find out who was involved the day it became a company. We can find out, if we scroll down, everyone who has shares. We can find out, what do we got? Articles of association, like all of this stuff is usually pretty nondescript. We don't need to worry about it. I think this is all kind of legalese. But yeah, you can go through and click any of these things to find out extra information about this, where they're registered, who's involved, and you can try to find out more about them after that. You're not going to get a ton of information from this stuff. You will get people involved, their whereabouts, where they're from, and whether or not they have a controlling interest in the company. All of those things are actually quite important. And I think that this is a great resource for, again, figuring these things out. It's why all 3 of the things that we've discussed so far, whether you're going on the website and finding out the company names and people involved, or using OpenCorporates or Companies House to try to find out more information about these individuals or companies, where they're incorporated, how they're incorporated, what industries they're involved in, etc. Yeah, that should do it.
Well, and I think like the thing to remember is that the UK is somewhat unique in that they allow free and relatively unfettered access to their corporate registry, but it's valuable to check the corporate registry often wherever you're looking. Like I know I've been able to report on a few stories by going through ASICS, which is the Australian registry. There you have to pay for most of the documents, but the documents you do get are pretty detailed, like down to the specific shareholders and things like that. Similarly, both Cas and I have been able to report stories by pulling documents from ICRIS, which is Hong Kong's system. It is not easy to use. It is easy to spend money that you didn't realize you were spending, but it is possible to get useful documents from it. And so once you have the corporate name and have moved through the broader resources like OpenCorporates and things like that, and you've identified what country it is, if there's more information you need to know about that entity, going to that country's corporate registry is generally a good place to start.
Yep, I agree with all of that. I also think, obviously, you're right where the first place is to go to the website and just kind of check other company names, the real company names, essentially, because they're usually doing business as something. They're incorporated as something else. And then after you have that information, that's when you can actually start to explore on a more comprehensive scale. And it's, again, worth noting, like you can delve into corporate documents. It will often cost you money, even in the United States sometimes, to access these corporate documents, right? If it's in specific states, it will cost you money. And the reality is, in a lot of states, like Wyoming, you're probably not going to get very much information from any of those corporate documents. They specifically create their corporate structure to be very privacy focused.
Now, if it's in a place like Florida is great. You get free access to their corporate registry and they tell you like everything. You get like almost complete access to every document they've ever filed with the Secretary of State. You can get specific detail about shareholders and members. Florida is a good place if you're trying to do research on that type of thing. So after we've learned a little bit about the company, what's the next thing we should do?
It depends on what kind of company it is. If, for instance, I think maybe I'll pass this one off to you, Bennett, but if it's a U.S., let's say a U.S. publicly traded company, where would you go next? What would be the next move in your opinion?
Like Cas was saying, when you're dealing with publicly traded companies, you can search all of their SEC filings by going to the SEC search, which they call EDGAR. I don't know why they call it EDGAR. It's apparently an acronym, but like if we look up MicroStrategy, we can see their current reports, their insider trading reports, their different registrations of sales. And so if I'm trying to understand like their most recent financial situation, I'm going to look at their most recent filed quarterly reports or updates like that.
And I just want to put this out there for everybody, but don't expect to jump into these filings and be like, oh, this is very clear and easily understandable. I can decipher this very quickly. These things are complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. There's stuff that even to this day, I do not understand. Bennett and I have recently been talking about convertible notes and stock warrants, which are just a complex mess. But he's looking through this right now, and you can just see it's numbers on numbers on numbers. Even the idea that like it looks like we're talking about thousands. Well, we're not. This is in millions or in whatever. Like you really got to know your math and know what the hell is happening before you can even try to publicly comment on what these reports are suggesting.
Well, I know from experience you can try publicly commenting even before you really fully understand them. But it's helpful to spend some time trying to understand it. So yeah, this is helpful to look into things about different companies. The other one that can be good, especially if you're doing something like crypto research or financial research, is looking for their money services business registration. What does Coinbase have theirs under? Oh, here we go. So like if we want to look at Coinbases, we can see all the places they are registered. We can see their address that they're registered at, when it's valid for, and we can even download that registration and take a look at it. So registered out of their address in New York. They are registered in basically probably every state for activity. I'm not going to count to make sure that all the places are there, but they're there. And so it's good to do that. Sometimes those types of things will include a little bit of extra information about the company, like based on where they're registering it or things like that. And so starting to look at what I think of as regulatory filings, so like going through EDGAR, going through FinCEN, going through things like that, helps you make sure that the company is like valid, current, and like up to date, right? That if they're a money services business, they've got that registration. If they're a public company, they are up to date with their filings. And when you check the Secretary of State or the corporate registry, sometimes you'll even find there that companies are behind on their filings, and that can be useful information.
And that's with publicly traded stocks, I think, publicly traded companies. I guess some private companies as well. It depends on who they're acquiring money from, whether they have to file with the SEC. If it's a company that isn't necessarily a publicly traded company, maybe it's mostly a VC related company, that's when I would suggest to people to explore something like Crunchbase. Now, I will say that I have an account, so I am able to kind of utilize it in a better way than some people might be able to. However, if we look at a company like Tether, what I'm able to ascertain from this is that they have made 13 investments. They've had 3 exits. I can get employee profile pages. Some of these might be old or
they're sometimes a little questionable. The Crunchbase, like the investment parts is good. The employee profiles can be a little eyebrow raising.
There's some confusing bits about that. Like they say it's located in Seattle, Washington. That's wrong. There's a different company called Tether that is located in Seattle, Washington. So like there are things that you have to know what you're getting yourself into when you're using a site like Crunchbase, because there can be plenty of errors. But as Bennett pointed out, the investment part is generally pretty reliable. So if we go here, we can see how many investments, over what period of time the investments were made, and whether or not Tether was a lead investor. Lead investor simply meaning more or less that they were one of the higher capital, one of the companies that put in a larger amount of capital into a raise. And they'll tell you the most recent investment and how much the raise was for. That doesn't mean, to be clear here, like this says, oh, they went into a company called XREX and raised 18.8 million. Well, that doesn't mean necessarily that they raised $18.8 million from Tether. It means that they raised that in total and that Tether was a lead investor. So if we go down here, you can see it says lead investor. Yes, it was a corporate round. And so if we click this now, just so everyone has some sort of idea here, again, if we click XREX, we can see even though last round they made 18.8, they've actually their total funding has been for 42.8. It tells us what they do, where they're located. Again, these are things we need to double check, right? We cannot rely on Crunchbase to accurately suggest this company is located in Taipei. It very well might be, I don't know, but it will tell us their total funding amount and over what amount of time and how that money was acquired. So we can see that the majority of their funding was actually through seed rounds, but their corporate round, most recent, is when
that's when Tether gave them a bunch of money.
Tether gave them $1 million. So we can see there's been a lot of investors in this company. There's been roughly 21 investors or so. Maybe some of these are duplicates, but there's been something like 20 investors. There was only one investor in the corporate round. It was Tether, and they gave 18.8. So these are things we can ascertain. It helps us understand connections. It helps us look into other companies. It helps us kind of, I guess it depends on the company, but it definitely helps you get an idea of like what they're investing in or who is investing in them. And I think all of those things are quite valuable for us. So I've had a lot of good value from Crunchbase, as much as I don't know who created it. Is this Michael Arrington? Is it?
I do not know the answer to that.
I think it might be. And if it is, that feels bad. But yeah, regardless, it is quite useful.
I'm glad to hear that Arrington did at least one useful thing in his life.
I do think it's funny that he's like created his fund and called it XRP, like everything is XRP, and just like how embarrassing that is. But anyway, yeah, let's continue here. Outside the fact, this actually, something that Bennett is going to show you right now is far outside the scope of what we were just discussing, even though it's pretty applicable to everything. So go ahead.
Court listener, recap search is an incredible tool because what they do is they like index every single docket in the United States federal courts. And whenever someone who's a free law member with the recap extension, like I am, goes and spends money on Pacer, like I do, it copies that document and uploads it here. So that way, when you want to do something like look up Sam Bankman-Fried, you just type in his name here, give it a minute to search because it's a nonprofit, things run a little bit slow, and then we can find his docket here, throw it in descending, and we can see, let's find a good one. You can open up the PDF filings and read like these specific court documents and things like this. And in any case where there is not a document yet, if you have a Pacer account, like again, I do, you can just go directly to Pacer and then it will like automatically prompt you to buy and upload the file, which I'm not going to do right now because that's just a notice of attorney appearance. But this lets you like actually read and understand the multitude of court cases going on at any given time. Well, lets you read them. Understanding is a separate issue you have to deal with yourself.
Bennett just mentioned Pacer, and I will say Pacer is a ugly system, and it is all about value extraction, and it like I dislike everything about it. But I will say that again, it is quite valuable, and if you can afford it, okay, and I totally understand. There's plenty of people out there who can't. It can be expensive, as Bennett pointed out to me today. If you spend over $35 in a quarter, is it every quarter?
It's something like that. And it might be 30, but there's some minimum you can spend up to each quarter where you don't actually get billed.
And to be clear, like it's 10 cents every document or something like
every
that.
Page.
Every page, right? Every page. So if a document is 65 pages, right, you're paying, like you are paying $6.50 just for that 65 page document. So it can absolutely get expensive, especially if you're really trying to keep up on some big important case. And I don't want to suggest that everyone can afford it. We have the benefit of working for a organization that is in the media space. So we tell them we bought this thing, pay us back for it, especially if it applies to something we're writing. Not everyone has that, but sometimes it can be well worth your time, your money, and your energy to go for it. You know, it might be worth it for you, especially if it's some small case that isn't being reported by the media in general. Like if it's something you're really fascinated by, I don't know. I just think it's worth it to have a Pacer account. So I want to put that out there.
Yeah, I will add also, it's a Pacer account is a good thing to get ahead of time because it takes a while to have an active Pacer account.
That's right.
You put in your information and they mail you a physical like confirmation code that you have to type in. And so there's like a week lag at minimum from when you say, I want a Pacer account until you're able to start reading dockets. So if that's a thing you think you might need coming up, start getting on it.
So, and now I know we're going to start getting into some other kind of blockchain exclusive tools that people can utilize. But before we do that, just want to utilize one other thing for everybody. So I know that there's going to be qualms about this and people suggesting, you know, the New York Times is garbage. Look, I have my issues with the New York Times as well. I'm not suggesting that everyone should go out there and immediately go buy a New York Times account. The reason that I have an account personally is less because I want to read their current articles about, I don't know, some Biden advisors are discussing how to persuade. I don't give a shit. Really, I truly don't care. Not only do I not care about this, but I don't care about
the first thing under their masthead.
All of it, everything about this does not appeal to me. Okay, I just want to be upfront and honest about that. But what does appeal to me is their archives. Their archives, because they are the newspaper of record for America for over 100 years. You can utilize this archive in ways that you can't necessarily utilize other archives. So I'll go ahead and type in a company that is, again, near and dear to our hearts, Deltek. And if I type in Deltek, we're finding stories from 1968. Deltek Banking raises profit. We're finding stories about Deltek.
The shoestring one is fun.
Yeah. Deltek shoestring laces continents. Deltek encircles the world. Deltek sees profit for first quarter, January 18th, 1972. We get all of these interesting stories that could teach you a lot about something that you do not like. Deltek still an important Caribbean bank that is involved in all kinds of weird stuff. And, you can search through here and find some really interesting stories about Deltek from decades past. Now, does that apply to Deltek now? No, it doesn't. I don't think it does. I don't think it's fair for me to utilize a story from 1978 to discuss the current situation. It does provide you with some sort of archival concept. And sometimes it's great for some company that you're looking into and you need something from 5 or 10 years ago even, right? So I do think there is a lot of value to be had there from the New York Times archive. Does that mean that you need to go out and immediately buy a New York Times subscription? No, and I'm not suggesting that, but I have found it quite useful for myself.
Their cooking coverage is also pretty good.
Yes, but that's for you and me. I don't think that's necessarily all.
But, speaking of archives, it is very helpful to be able to kind of look at the past for certain things. And so say you were a person with an unhealthy fascination with stablecoins. And so you wanted to learn more about the very beginning of the very first stablecoin. We're going to call Tether the first stablecoin. It works for most definitions of stablecoin. And so it can be interesting and helpful to go back and see how these companies were marketing themselves in 2014, in 2015, in things like that. See what questions they thought were going to be important for the firm and things like that. And in doing this, you can often find changes. See at what period they added a certain executive to the website, took a certain executive off the website, changed the way they were discussing certain features or things like that. Yeah. Talking about, they remove the part where they talk about how you can get tethers without going through the KYC process. At a certain point, you decide you don't want that listed on your public website anymore, but thanks to wonderful tools like the Wayback Machine, assholes who are obsessed with stablecoins can still find it and go back and mention it for years to come. It's things like that that can be really helpful on these archive websites. Yeah, and so also similar thing sometimes you can see a corporate entity change. At one point 3 years ago, they were referencing one corporate body. Now they're referencing another one. Now you have an opportunity to figure out, was there a merger? Was there a redomiciling? Why did this change? And does that mean anything? Did a bunch of new investors come in and it's not really the same company it used to be? They're just using the same name. Those kind of things happen. And so looking at how it's changed over time helps you kind of figure that kind of thing out.
Yep, I think that's awesome. The last ones, I have no other ones on my docket. I think the last couple are all you, Bennett, or the last 3.
This one right here is called BuiltWith, and it's a little bit of a funky one. It's not going to apply to everything, but what it does is it tells you what technology a website is built with, what libraries are loaded, which hosting providers they're using, and things like that, which on its own can be useful for finding things. I don't have the advanced features, but what's most useful on this website to me, and is one of their free features, is their relationship tab here. And so what this is showing us is the different analytics IDs. So Google Universal Analytics and Google's newer analytics, what tags have been associated with this website and what other websites have those been associated with. And so you can see other websites that have overlapped with this. Man, there are some nonsense ones on here. What is going on? I thought this was going to...
Well, scammers are probably...
Yeah, I guess. So I guess what's happening here... Yeah, so I think what's happening here must be that some of these scam websites are copying and pasting the whole source code of the Tether website, including the analytics IDs. And so when they stand up their website, it's being tracked under the same analytics IDs, because most of these are not things you would expect to be associated with Tether.
Yeah.
More commonly, what you'll see on this kind of thing is it'll help you you'll see a cluster of companies that all use the same marketing firm or something like that. And so again, it's just another tool to start piecing through relationships. In this case, I think most of these are scammers who are copy and pasting the source code and therefore copying and pasting the analytics tags.
Which also tells you something about what they're used. It tells you that Tether is essentially a payment service, right?
Yeah.
That's why they're getting copied and scammed or copied by scammers in such a way.
Yeah, and this will also show you, perhaps more valuable, the IP addresses for the hosting. And so sometimes here, overlap can be more meaningful. Early on in Tether's history, it was more common for them to use kind of shared hosting and stuff. Now their addresses are basically only associated with their domains because they're a more serious company now. Wait, I say that, then what is this? don-m.com. Interesting. Not the point, but this is another way to help you kind of piece out some relationships. The last two tools I kind of want to talk about are the only two tools we're talking about today that actually touch on the blockchain. And one of them is the Blockchain Explorer for whatever your blockchain of choice is. EtherScan is probably the best.
Yeah. There might be, if you're a Solana user, there's SolScan. If you're a Tron user, there's a Tron scan. There's usually, if it's a well-known blockchain, it will have its own kind of scanning site.
Exactly. And what that lets you do is take an address that you have, that you found somewhere, and look at who is that address transacting with? What kind of tokens are they transferring in and out? What kind of assets have they held over time? This is one of Justin's old addresses. It's mostly abandoned now, except to hold a bunch of value. What kind of tokens do they still hold? And things like that. And so this is before I had the more advanced tool I'm about to show, I did entire long blockchain tracing things, just carefully following transactions through blockchain explorers. This one funded this one co-spent with this one, etc., and gradually building that up. And you can do that just with the blockchain explorers.
And really dating us here, I think you and I both started utilizing blockchain explorers with Omni. Yeah. More so than Ethereum. So we were because Omni was the main chain of choice for Tether, we were utilizing OmniScan, which I'm not sure.
Omni Explorer. It does.
And it was quite useful for us back then. It was great, actually. It was really, really, really useful. And getting proficient in utilizing these things, while it's not as good as some of the tools that you can use, as Bennett is about to show, it is pretty, if you're proficient, it can be really, really useful for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you are doing more advanced blockchain analytics, I've had really good luck with Breadcrumbs. They have some inexpensive tiers, relatively inexpensive, I think $5 to $10 a month, that give you access to Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then they have ones that scale in price beyond that up to those targeted at organizations. But you can take an address you have like that, plug it in here, and start to see what other addresses are we sending to? What other addresses are we receiving from? How are those interconnected? What do the transactions coming into and out of this look like? And things like that, all which help you kind of gain a better understanding of where this address sits and how it matters, or if it matters. Again, this is a little bit more of another one of those advanced tools. I think blockchain analytics is not something even a lot of people who want to investigate crypto really need to necessarily use a tool like this for. You can get really far just using regular blockchain explorers and things like that. If you picture yourself someday being the next ZachXBT, then yeah, start cutting your teeth on breadcrumbs, get a little comfortable, and spend some time making sure you understand how it works so you don't end up making a bunch of crazy claims online like Vitalik Buterin funded the Chinese mafia or whatever different people try to claim sometimes because they don't know how to read these things. Spend some time. Look at the transactions. Remember, anyone can send to anyone, so receiving from someone doesn't necessarily incriminate someone. Spend some time, look at it, think it through, but can be a really useful tool, especially as you get into more kind of advanced blockchain analytics.
Yeah, I would say always for everyone, no matter what tool it is we mentioned, whether it's the New York Times or Breadcrumbs or whatever, if you can utilize it for free to the fullest extent that you possibly can. And if you feel like you've either accumulated enough value from it or need to utilize kind of more complex tools that they offer to find out more, then I would recommend, just ride it until you can, and when you're ready to pay for it, pay for it. But all of these tools hopefully prove to be quite useful for everyone. And I assume most people are quite familiar with most of these already, but if you're not, hopefully we introduced you to a tool that you'll be able to utilize in the future at some point.
And these things can be really intimidating, but I do want to add that Cas and I are almost entirely self-taught in this regard. There were some people on Twitter who helped us out or introduced us to some of these tools early on, but in terms of their daily use, it was mostly just trial and error, working through it, trying to understand it step by step, and going back over it and back over it. And I think that lots of people can benefit from trying out this kind of thing, and I think practicing this kind of thing makes the useful skepticism we talked about way back in episode 100 way easier and way more natural when you have some familiarity with how to vet certain types of claims or how to look into certain things. It is way more easy to be an effective skeptic at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of it, I think it's really daunting to actually be skeptical in general. I think you and I feel far less there is no daunting. We don't feel daunting at all when we're skeptical because we can utilize any of these tools to instantly be is my skepticism founded or am I crazy? And if you
sometimes we've been crazy.
I mean, we're crazy for sure, but we can at least stop ourselves from announcing it publicly by utilizing some of these tools.
And I will add, though this will not always be possible, it is helpful to have a partner in crime where you can text them or message them and go, hey, am I crazy? Or is this what I think it is? And having someone or a couple of someones who are on the same journey as you, who are willing to go, I think you've misread that completely, can help you avoid some embarrassing missteps.
Yeah, and this is another thing. I think X has, if you're just starting on Twitter, X, or whatever you want to call it, it's far less useful than it used to be. But Bennett and I were able to grow followings to the point where we can, at this point, again, I think this is, we benefited from timing on this, but we can reach out to people or publicly say, I don't understand this thing. I would love if someone who does understand it could talk to me about it. And we actually get a response. Now, I'm not saying everyone is going to get that, especially if you're new and you have no followers on X or something. Probably no one's going to see your call to help. We have been able to utilize that a lot. And I will say that experts are often quite responsive, and it's worth at least shooting them a cold email or whatever, even if they don't respond. And don't get upset with someone if they don't respond. People are busy. Don't be an asshole. I think it's worth reaching out to these people just to at least be hey, I don't know this. Could you help me? And oftentimes you'll find out that they'll be sure, I'd love to help. So yeah, I mean, this is the best summary Bennett and I can give. I know that we've had ZachXBT on before to discuss other cryptocurrency tools and how to be careful in general when investing or putting money into crypto. So feel free to listen to that episode if you're so inclined. Otherwise, please don't look up Cascoin on any of these tools that we've talked to you about.